Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, where we take up important articles of the day from the newspaper and discuss them in detail as per the demands of Civil Services exam. Articles covered today are displayed on your screen and their notes in PDF and Word format are provided in the description box down below. Without further ado, let us begin.
Now, before starting off our today's discussion, let me make an announcement. Now, we all know that choosing optional is one of the most critical decisions that we can make in our UPSC journey. As the optional, it is a rank decider and hence it is necessary that we make an informed choice. And in this regard, RAU'S IAS optional faculties, they are conducting an open house session of various optional subjects. As this optional open house is scheduled between September 12th and 21st on 1 pm. Now, starting off our today's discussion with the first article of the day, and it appeared in the front page of today's Hindu newspaper. Now, this article reports that the Finance Ministry of the Union Government it had notified the constitution of 31 benches of the GST Appellate Tribunals across 28 states and 8 union territories. And this has set the stage to resolve growing number of taxpayer disputes with the Revenue Department. Now the topic for our today's discussion is the GST Appellate Tribunal, also known as GST 80. And this topic is important from GS Paper 3 perspective as the syllabus highlights government budgeting. Further, the topic of goods and services tax was asked in the mains of the year 2017 as the question it asked us to explain the salient features of 101st Amendment Act of the year 2016. Further, the topic of GST was also asked in the prelims of the year 2017. Hence, this topic is important both from prelims as well as mains perspective. Therefore, in the scope of our today's discussion on GST Appellate Tribunal, we will first take a brief overview about what is a goods and services tax regime. Further, we will go into detail about what is a GST Appellate Tribunal, and following which we will discuss its benefits in order to promote ease of doing business and reduce the number of taxpayer disputes. Hence, let us start our today's discussion by discussing what is a GST regime. Now, the goods and services tax, also known as GST, it is a unified tax system. And this system, it replaced previously the multiple indirect taxes that were levied by both central as well as state governments. And this taxation regime was implemented from 1st of July of the year 2017. Now the GST, it has a dual structure which comprises of central GST and state GST respectively, which are levied concurrently by central as well as state governments. Whereas, in addition, there is also a component called Integrated Goods and Services Tax, as it is also levied on interstate supplies as well as imports. While this integrated GST, it is collected by the central government. Further, this integrated GST is apportioned to the appropriate state, that is, the destination state. Now, also important is the role of GST Council in this regard, as this council is a joint forum which was constituted under Article 279 subsection A of the Indian Constitution. And this council, it consists of Union Finance Minister who acts as a chairperson of the council, and it further consists of representatives from all states and union territories. And this GST Council, it makes decisions on various aspects of GST. This council, it decides the tax rates of GST. It also decides upon the exemption as well as the revenue sharing mechanism that takes place between center as well as state governments. Now, after we have taken a brief overview about what is a goods and services tax regime, let us now understand what is a GST Appellate Tribunal. Now, Chapter 18th of the Central GST Act, it provides for an appeal and revenue mechanism for dispute resolution under the GST regime. As Section 109 of the CGST Act, it empowers the central government to constitute, on recommendation of GST Council, an appellate tribunal which is known as Goods and Services Appellate Tribunal. And this tribunal, it hears appeals against the orders which are passed by appellate authority or the revisional authority. Now, this Goods and Services Appellate Tribunal, it is a forum for second appeal in GST laws, and it also acts as a first forum for dispute resolution between center and state governments. Now, this GST Appellate Tribunal, it hears appeals based on orders of appellate authorities, which are constituted both under central and state GST acts. Now, when a revenue department, it raises a claim against a GST taxpayer, this GST taxpayer can contest the claim at various levels. And this starts from adjudicating officer, who is also known as proper officer under the GST law. And if the taxpayer, he receives an unfavorable order from this adjudicating officer, the taxpayer then can approach the appellate authority, who is also a commissioner of appeals. And the order of this appellate authority is then appealable to the GST Appellate Tribunal. Hence, we can say that this GST Appellate Tribunal, it acts as a first forum for appeal against the orders of appellate authority. Hence, we can say that GST Appellate Tribunal, it acts as a second forum for appeal against the orders of adjudicating authority. Whereas, GST Appellate Tribunal, it is also a common forum for dispute resolution between both center and state governments. Thereby, this appellate tribunal, it ensures that there is a uniformity in redressal of GST disputes in the entire country. Now, this GST tribunal, it consists of a principal bench which is located in New Delhi, and also it may consist of many state benches. Now, this principal bench, it looks at a case which regards to interstate supply or place of supply disputes. Whereas these state benches, they hear matters which are related to state subjects, such as deciding of tax rates, exemptions, and valuation, as well as input tax credit, which are related to interstate affairs. Now, this principal bench and state boards, they consist of two technical members as well as two judicial members, which have an equal representation from both center and states. However, it must be noted that these four members, they would not sit for a hearing of each case. And the number of members in a case, it is decided by the threshold or value of dues involved. Now you'll ask, how many benches will there be for each state? The decision for number of state level benches is left at the discretion of every state. Now, after we have discussed what is a GST Appellate Tribunal, let us now discuss what are the benefits of having such a appellate tribunal. Now, this GST Appellate Tribunal, it comes with several benefits. The first is that it facilitates ease of doing business, as most businesses currently, they fall under GST radar. However, when there is a lack of tribunal to interpret and adjudicate the disputes, hence it makes it difficult for entrepreneurs to run their businesses, as the disputes, they stay unresolved for many years. However, by constituting such GST Appellate Tribunal, it thereby reduces the number of taxation related disputes, thereby facilitating the ease of doing business. Further, GST Appellate Tribunal, it also helps us to resolve contentious issues, thereby reducing the number of tax related litigations. As this tribunal, it will help clarify the provisions of GST law, which in turn will reduce the scope for future litigation. Now, as we have understood that appellate tribunal, it helps bring clarity in GST laws, as currently taxation related litigation, they are filed in courts of India. However, with constitution of GST Appellate Tribunal, this tribunal will then be tasked with interpreting the provisions of GST law, and hence each tax division within a state will start following tribunal's decision, which over time will lead to reduced litigation because the law will become clearer and the questions of law will be settled by this tribunal. Further, this GST tribunal also helps lowers the pendency of tax related cases, as since this tribunal will have a bench in every state, which will then reduce the number of cases that are pending in judiciary and will further aid the faster dispute resolution of every case. Now, as we know, up till June the 30th, there were about 14,000 cases that were pending. But with constitution of GST Appellate Tribunal, such cases will then reduce. Further, this GST Appellate Tribunal also helps in cost-effective litigation, as GST Appellate Tribunal will be beneficial for taxpayers as currently they have to file appeal in high courts, which is both time consuming and a costly process. But with formation of GST Appellate Tribunal, this litigation process is expected to become more cost effective. Further, this GST Appellate Tribunal, it also resolves the number of divergent views that exist currently on same issues. While different state tribunals, they may currently hold divergent views on similar issues, which currently adds to complexity of the GST mechanism. However, with a centralized principal bench which is located in New Delhi, it will be able to resolve such divergent issues, therefore simplifying the GST mechanism. Hence, this GST Appellate Tribunal, it facilitates ease of doing business, resolves contentious issues, helps bring clarity in GST laws, lowers the pendency of cases, has a cost-effective litigation process, and helps resolve the divergent views that currently exist on same issues. Hence, this was all for today's discussion on GST Appellate Tribunal. Now moving forward to the second article of the day, and it appeared in page 8 of today's Hindu newspaper. Now the Defence Acquisition Council, also known as DAC, it has cleared a long pending deal and has approved the procurement of 12 Sukhoi 30 MKI jets for the Indian Air Force. And these jets, they will be manufactured under a licensed agreement by Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. And further, the Defence Minister of India, he has directed the Chief of Defence Staff, Service Chiefs and other officials to work towards increasing the minimum indigenous content threshold in consultation with Indian industry. Hence, the topic of our today's discussion is the topic of defense indigenization. As this topic is important from GS Paper 3 perspective, because the syllabus, it highlights indigenization of technology. Further, a question on defense manufacturing, it appeared in mains of the year 2014, wherein the question asked us to elaborate on foreign direct investment in the defense sector, and we needed to highlight the influence of this decision on Indian defense and economy in short and long run. Further, various defense platforms that are in news have been asked in prelims before, which is apparent from this PYQ of the year 2018 in the prelims exam. Hence, this topic is important from both prelims as well as mains perspective. Therefore, the scope of our today's discussion on defense indigenization, it involves the need for such a move. Further, we will discuss the government's initiatives that are taken to promote indigenous manufacturing of various defense platforms. Following this, we will also discuss the constraints that the both government as well as industry faces in order to increase the indigenous content of different defense platforms, which will be followed by a suggestive way forward before conclusion of this discussion. Hence, we will start our today's discussion by highlighting the need for increasing the focus on indigenous defense manufacturing. Now, there are several reasons why do we need defense indigenization. The first are related to security concerns that India currently faces. There are multiple security concerns that India faces. The first is that there are territorial disputes with two countries, that are China and Pakistan, which is further aided by insurgency in the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. Further, northeastern states as well as left-wing extremist areas, they also face severe insurgencies, and this has intensified the need for more funding in defense sector as well as procurement of indigenous platforms. Further, India wants to become a regional power, and hence it needs to act as a net security provider in the Indian Ocean region. And therefore, India needs to acquire self-sufficiency in terms of development of advanced defense hardware and its technology in order to fulfill this responsibility. Further, there are several economic benefits which are associated with indigenization of defense sector. As indigenization, it will reduce our dependency on arms imports and will further preserve foreign exchange of India. Therefore, it will help India reduce its current account deficit in a significant manner. Further, defense indigenization, it also helps in capacity building of Indian manufacturing sector, as currently there are deficiencies in armed forces procurement. Thereby, the armed forces, they need to focus on development of advanced and sophisticated weapon system to combat with threats that arise from land, sea as well as air. And hence, these threats can be further tackled in a more better manner by indigenized platforms. Further, with passage of time, there has been an advancement in the military technologies, and the nations who have developed these advanced technologies, such as hypersonic missiles or ramjets, they gain significant advantage over their competitor nations. Further, these advanced technologies, they are subjected to various export controls. Therefore, if India needs to have these kind of technologies with their military, there needs to be several advancement in indigenous technology, and this requires efficient infrastructure on India's part. Now, after we've highlighted the need for defense indigenization, let us take a look at government's initiative that promotes defense indigenization. Now, the first government initiative that promotes indigenization, it came in Draft Defense Production and Export Policy of the year 2020. As this policy, it aims to increase the India's defense production by 2 times in a period of 5 years. Further, India also brought forward a defense acquisition procedure in the year 2020. And this procedure, it aims to empower Indian domestic industry through Make in India projects, which has an ultimate aim of turning India into a global manufacturing hub. Further, the government, it also favors a strategic partnership model, which involves partnership with global firms with an intention to technology transfer. Further, Government of India, it also introduced a Srijan portal, which acts as a one-stop shop online portal, and it provides access to vendors who take up items that can be taken for indigenization. Further, government also encourages the defense entrepreneurship. As Government of India, it brought forward Defense India Startup Challenge, which favors creation of functional prototype of products and technologies which are relevant for national security. Also, government has brought forward a positive indigenization list, and this list, it describes certain products which are embargoed from imports. Thereby, these products will then be manufactured in the Indian soil. Further, government has also created a technology development fund. As this fund, it encourages participation of both public as well as private industries for enhancing cutting edge technology capabilities for defense application. In the end, government has also introduced the concept of defense industrial corridors, which are then formed in states of Uttar Pradesh as well as Tamil Nadu, and it aims to serve as an engine for economic development and growth of defense industrial base. Now, after we have taken a look at government's initiative, let us discuss constraints that defense indigenization in India currently faces. Now, there are many constraints that are faced by Indian industry in order to increase the amount of indigenization of defense technologies. The first among which is that there is a lack of overarching organization to oversee such indigenization efforts. As currently, there are many agencies that are responsible for indigenization, and these include directorates of various defense services, DRDO, or defense PSUs. And these agencies, they are involved in efforts to channelize the indigenous procurement. However, these efforts, they are largely disjointed, they lack synergy, and there are no mechanisms in place to facilitate their individual interaction. Thereby, it negatively affects the armed forces' efforts to indigenize defense platforms. Further, India also witnesses low participation of the private sector, especially the MSMEs, as these MSMEs they can play a critical role in developing niche technologies, as well as they can provide solutions which are critical for indigenizations. However, these MSMEs they have a low participation in defense indigenization efforts. Further, there is an absence of a comprehensive policy in this regard, as currently Department of Defense Production, also known as DDP, it only contains a policy for indigenization of components and spare parts. However, it lacks a conceptual and procedural inadequacies that are necessary for defense indigenization. Further, there are issues which are related to technology and significant delays in production of indigenous platforms. As Indian defense industry currently, it suffers from insufficiency, low productivity and low R&D, especially related to advanced weapon system and defense technologies. For example, defense research organizations they have gone through several production delays and cost overruns while developing indigenous platforms such as Arjun tanks as well as light combat aircraft which is called as Tejas. Further, these efforts to promote indigenization they suffer from skewed decision making, as currently there are lack of military inputs in decision making, national security strategy due to which India suffers flaws such as absence of national security doctrine and long-term planning. Now, after we have discussed various constraints that defense indigenization faces, let us discuss steps required which may further the plan to indigenize our defense sector. Now, the first important step in this regard is the need to ensure adequate funding for defense research in India. And this is required such as strategic projects they are taken up with full rigor. And in this regard, the Defense Research and Development Organization or DRDO it should seek additional funds at revised estimates as it will help ensure that R&D plans of such organization they progress as per set timelines. Further, the Ministry of Finance it also needs to create a defense renewable fund which will act as a non-lapsable defense modernization fund which will be used exclusively for procurement of key defense assets at critical times. Further, there should also be an efforts to ensure resolving of procedural issues, as these procedural issues they need to be done away with in order to ensure that testing, quality assurance and certification agencies they work more as a part of team which are engaged in indigenization rather than external technology entities. Further, there should also be measures in order to improve accountability and transparency of defense industry, which will help avoid excessive, wasteful and corrupt military expenditures, and it will also ensure high levels of transparency and accountability in military budgeting and procurement processes. Further, this also need to adopt what is called as 5I approach. As the concept of 5I, it currently includes identification, incubation, innovation, integration, and indigenization. And this will help industry accelerate the progress, reduce cost, and complete the defense procurement in a time bound manner. Hence, by funding the defense research, forming a defense renewable fund, resolving procedural issues, enhancing accountability and transparency, and adopting a 5I approach is a way forward in order to promote defense indigenization of the Indian military. Hence, this was all for today's discussion on defense indigenization. Now, moving forward to the next article of the day, which appeared in page 2 of today's Hindu newspaper. Now, hundreds of accredited social health activists, also known as ASHA workers, they have been on an indefinite strike in state of Delhi from August 28th. And this is due to they face adverse working conditions. Now, these ASHA workers, they are female community health workers who have been instituted as community-based health functionaries under the National Rural Health Mission, which was launched in the year 2005. Now, the core of this ASHA program has been an intention to build the capacity of community members in taking care of their own health and be partners in health services at the community level. And in most cases, women from village itself, they are selected as ASHA workers who then operate within the confines of local community. However, these ASHA workers, they have been subjected to adverse working conditions. And this has been the subject of various discussion at health forums. Hence, in the scope of our today's discussion on ASHA workers, we will first highlight their significance in improving the health outcomes in a local community. Further, we will also discuss difficulties which are faced by such ASHA workers in discharging their duties, followed by a suggestive way forward, which will then highlight measures that can be undertaken in order to improve the working condition of ASHA workers. Hence, let us start our today's discussion by discussing the significance of having such ASHA workers. Now, these ASHA workers, they provide an improved outreach towards groups that form marginalized section in the communities. For example, these ASHA workers, they have access to women in the community who may face difficulties in moving out of the confines of their home in order to access health services. However, with ASHA workers, they can reach the homes of these women and provide for health services. And these provision of health services for women, it has enhanced the level of maternal care that exists in Indian society, as it has improved access to health services for women, which has led to improved institutionalized delivery, their improved nutrition, as well as improved health for their children. And this has improved the health outcomes in general for Indian society, such as India has been declared polio free, as well as India has reported an increase in use of contraceptive by such women. And these, they all can be attributed to such ASHA workers. Further, these ASHA workers, they also increase the access of local community to primary health services. And this has resulted into low out-of-pocket expenditure on primary health care by Indian society. Now, these ASHA activists, they also played a critical role during COVID-19 pandemic, as these ASHA workers, They helped in conducting community level surveillance, contact tracing, encouraging behavior change, and monitoring of isolation and quarantine norms. Further, these ASHA women, they also helped in providing non-COVID related essential services such as doorstep delivery of medicines for tuberculosis or HIV, etc. Further, these women they also helped in spreading awareness about vaccination and getting eligible beneficiaries vaccinated in order to prevent the spread of COVID-19 pandemic. Hence, these ASHA workers they have improved better outreach for marginalized section, has helped enhance maternal care, has helped improve health outcomes, have helped increase access to primary health services, and played a critical role during COVID-19 pandemic. However, these ASHA workers they face several difficulties in discharging their day-to-day duties. What are these difficulties? Let us discuss these in the next slide. Now, the first issue that these ASHA workers face is that they are provided with inadequate compensation. As these ASHA workers, they are still considered as volunteers, and hence the governments they are not obligated to pay them their salaries, and hence the task based incentives that these ASHA workers get they are often below the minimum wages. Further, these ASHA activists they also face patriarchal hurdles. As initiating community action at a village level, it is not very feasible for these ASHA workers, which may be due to lack of female representation in village council and their limited involvement in the decision making process. Further, these ASHA workers they also face hurdles which are related to poor infrastructure. As remote villages, they have poor roads. Thereby, this demotivates an ASHA worker as they face difficulties in their transportation. Further, these ASHA workers they also face high workloads as they are often involved in other work which may be related to other government departments, and this goes beyond the scope of their designated roles. Further, there are also other demotivating factors that reduce the incentives of ASHA workers to work, and these include shortage of medicines, lack of training, family disapproval, attitude of health staff at referral centers, and non cooperation with other health workers. And hence, all these factors they combine into difficulties that these ASHA workers they face into their daily roles. Now, what are suggestions that can help improve the working of such ASHA workers? Let us take a look at these suggestions in the next slide. Now, the need to improve working of accredited social health activists, it includes the need to develop mechanisms for both higher and timely provision of incentives to these ASHA workers. As these higher and timely incentives, it should be followed by a fixed salary payment. And also, these ASHA workers, they can be made permanent employees of the state governments. Further, there is also a need to ensure universal coverage of ASHA to all areas, as currently they are primarily located in slums or slum like areas and pockets of vulnerable population only. However, providing coverage of ASHA workers to all areas will help increase the primary healthcare reach of the entire population. Further, there is also need to leverage technology in order to improve the ease of doing jobs for these ASHA workers. As these ASHA workers, they are currently required to make different registers. However, moving this work to an online mechanism will help reduce the work stress that these ASHA worker faces. And this can be facilitated by a whole of government approach, as this approach will help improve communities' literacy, physical infrastructure, and access to basic services at grassroots levels. And this will eventually improve the nature of work that these ASHA workers have to discharge. Further, with community sensitization, it will help increase awareness about the jobs and responsibilities of ASHA workers. Further, it will also help them understand the hurdles that these ASHA workers face in order to provide community with healthcare services. And this can be done also by enhancing the security of community health functionaries. Hence, by developing mechanisms for highly and timely incentives, providing universal coverage of ASHA workers to all areas, leveraging technologies to ease the job of ASHA workers, facilitating a whole of government approach in improving the community sensitization and enhancing security of community health functionaries will help improve the implementation of ASHA health activists, and this will eventually lead to better health outcomes for the entire community. Hence, this was all for today's discussion on ASHA workers. Now moving on to the next article of the day, and it appeared in page 4 of today's Hindu newspaper. In this article, the Karnataka CM he has ordered the state police to book suo moto cases and take stern action against the rise of hate speech and fake news in the state. And this highlights the issue of hate speech which leads to law and order problem in an Indian society. Now the state's responsibility to curb the issue of hate speech, it comes under reasonable restrictions under Article 19 subsection 2 of Indian Constitution. And this issue is also important from GS paper 2 perspective, as the syllabus it mentions Indian Constitution and its significant provision. Further, in the mains of the year 2014, a question appeared on concept of freedom of speech and expression. Further, the topic of fundamental rights are also important from prelims perspective, which is apparent from this PYQ of the year 2021 on one's right to marry a person, which is covered under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. Hence, our today's discussion on hate speech, it will involve legislative as well as judicial pronouncement on the issue of hate speech. Further, we will also discuss issues that comes into play with relation to handling of hate speech in the country. Further, we will also discuss steps that might be undertaken in order to tackle the menace of hate speech in Indian society. Hence, let us start our today's discussion by discussing what are legislative as well as judicial pronouncements with regards to hate speech. Now, to first understand what is hate speech, we must first understand that there is no specific legal definition of hate speech in the country. And in this regard, the Law Commission, in its 267th report, it suggested a definition of hate speech, which meant hate speech is an incitement of hatred which is primarily against a group of persons who are defined in terms of race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, as well as religious belief. Now, there are few legislation in India that are formed in order to tackle hate speech. The first legislation in this regard comes from the Constitution of India, which highlights that Article 19 subsection 2 it gives all the citizens a right to freedom of speech. But this right it is subjected to reasonable restrictions for preserving the public order, decency as well as morality. Now the second important legislation is the Indian Penal Code of the year of 1860, in which sections 153A, 153B as well as 298 it deals with speech or words that could create mischief, outrage religious beliefs or cause imputations to national integration. Further, the Representation of People Act of the year 1951, it consists of two important sections. The first is section 8, which disqualifies a person from contesting an election in case he is convicted for indulging in acts which amounts illegitimate use of freedom of speech and expression. Whereas Section 128 3A and Section 125, it prohibits promotion of enmity on grounds of religion, race, caste, community or language in connection with election, and it categorizes these activities as corrupt electoral practices, thereby prohibiting such activities. The fourth important legislation in this regard is Protection of Civil Rights Act of the year of 1955, where Section 7 of this Act, it penalizes the incitement and encouragement of untouchability through words which may be either spoken or written or through signs or by visible representation. Further, there are two important judicial pronouncements which are important in context of hate speech. The first pronouncement is that of State of Karnataka versus Praveen Togadia case of the year of 2004. In this case, the Supreme Court, it held that the state or district authorities, they were well within their rights to prohibit entry so that one does not make speeches which can create a public order issue. Also, the second case in this regard is that of Pravasi Bhalai Sangathan versus Union of India case of the year 2014. And in this case, the Supreme Court, it laid down certain guidelines with regards to politicians who make inflammatory speeches. Hence, these legislations as well as judicial pronouncements, they are important in determining hate speech in a country. Now, after we have discussed legislation, let us take a look at issues with regards to hate speech in a country. Now, there are several issues regarding hate speech. The first among them is that hate speech, it fuels discrimination, marginalization, as well as unfair treatment by reinforcing stereotypes and prejudices. And these stereotypes and marginalization efforts, they lead to social exclusion as well as denied opportunities for certain individuals or groups. Further, hate speech also affects the individual's overall psychological health as it induces stress, anxiety, depression, and damages self-esteem of an individual. And this leads to decreased sense of self-belongingness among an individual who is subjected to hate speech. Further, hate speech is also used to incite individuals and groups in order to commit targeted violence against certain individuals as well as communities. Now, after we have discussed critical issues in and around hate speech, let us discuss measures that can be undertaken in order to tackle the menace of hate speech. The first important suggestion in this regard, it comes from Law Commission's 267th report. And this report, it proposed addition of two new sections to the Indian Penal Code. The first section is section 153C as well as second is section 505A, and these sections, it will enable criminalization of hate speech specifically. Now, similar proposals, they were also made by Base Barua Committee as well as T.K. Vishwanathan Committee. Further, in 2020, a committee was formed in order to reform criminal laws, and this committee, it will examine the issue in and around tackling of hate speech. Further, there is an inherent need to implement a robust code of conduct which is essential for media agencies like Twitter, YouTube as well as Facebook, as it will enable effectively curbing of hate speech at the lowest level. Further, there is an inherent need to balance the exercise of freedom of speech and expression on one hand and countering the hate speech on another through a careful legislation. And hence, efforts should be made in order to enforce the legal provisions without suppressing the freedom of speech and expression. Hence, through an addition of section in Indian Penal Code, a robust code of conduct for media, as well as ensuring balance between freedom of speech and expression, as well as countering of hate speech, will further promote empathy, foster diversity, which will help the legal system of our country to combat hate speech, as it is important for fostering an inclusive and tolerant society. Now, this was all for today's discussion on hate speech. Now, moving on to the last article of the day, and it appeared in page 10 of today's Hindu newspaper. Now, this article highlights that on Independence Day of the year 2019, the water-starved Mahoba district of Uttar Pradesh, it had only 1,612 water connections. Whereas 4 years later, this number of water connection has reached more than 1.29 lakh in total. And this means that 98% of homes in Mahoba district, they are covered under functional tap connections. And this highlights the importance of Jal Jeevan Mission in bringing the functional tap connections into Indian homes. And this topic is also important from GS Paper 2 perspective, as it highlights welfare schemes for vulnerable section of population by center and states and performance of this scheme. Further, this topic is also important from mains perspective. As you can see from this previous year question of year 2019, which asked us to assess the performance of welfare scheme for vulnerable section and also asked us to discuss their lack of effectiveness. Hence, the scope of our today's discussion on Jal Jeevan Mission, we will first cover various details about Jal Jeevan Mission. Then, we will discuss the need for such mission in bringing functional tap connections to Indian homes. Further, we will also discuss salient features of such scheme and performance of such scheme in a country-wide manner. Towards the end, we will discuss challenges that implementation of such scheme faces currently. Hence, let us start our today's discussion by discussing what is a Jal Jeevan Mission. Now, Jal Jeevan Mission was envisaged to provide safe and adequate drinking water of 55 liters per day for an individual through a functional tap water connection. And it was aimed that this connection will be provided to all households in rural areas by the year 2024. This program will also implement source sustainability measures such as recharge and reuse through grey water management, water conservation, and rainwater harvesting. This mission will be based on a community approach to water and will include extensive information, education, and communication campaign as a key component for this mission. Further, this mission aims to create a Jan Andolan for water, thereby making it an everyone's priority. This scheme was launched in the year of 2019 and it comes under the Department of Drinking Water and Sanitation of Ministry of Jal Shakti. Further, this mission adopts the principle of equity and inclusion. That is, it ensures that no one is left out from getting a tap water connection and regular water supply in the village, especially the weaker and marginalized sections. The fund sharing pattern of this mission between center and state government is that of 90:10 for Himalayan and northeastern states, whereas for other states it is 50-50, while it is 100% in case of union territories. Now that we have discussed about Jal Jeevan Mission, let us take a look so as to why this mission was needed in the first place. Now, the first reason so as to why this mission was needed is because India had a large uncovered population which did not have an access to pipe water connection. In urban areas, 40.9% of the households have piped water connection, whereas around 50% of rural households and 28% of urban households are without access to an improved source of drinking water throughout the year. The second reason is that there exists a water scarcity. According to Niti Aayog, currently about 600 million Indians face high to extreme water stress and about 2 lakh people die every year due to inadequate access to safe waters. Also, the number of water bodies is declining rapidly. For example, Bangalore in 1960s had about 262 lakes and now this number has reduced to only 10 lakes. Further, there has been an increasing demand for water. Now, the Central Groundwater Board estimates that nearly a fifth of urban local bodies are already facing water crisis due to excessive extraction, failed monsoon, and unplanned development. By the year 2030, the country's water demand is projected to become 2 times the available water supply. Further, the current water quality is poor. As per report of Ministry of Consumer Affairs, which has identified the quality of piped water drinking in major cities in India, the quality has failed to comply with adequate drinking water standards. Also, there is a falling groundwater level. Now, groundwater level in India has declined by 61% between the year 2007 and the year 2017. Further, India witnesses a series of waterborne diseases, which affects about 37.7 million people annually. There are other issues as well, which include low water use efficiency, leakages, inappropriate water tariffs, less focus on recharge of groundwater level in city planning, etc. After discussing the need of such mission, let us discuss the reforms that were taken in order to make this mission possible. The first reform that was taken was that to shift the focus of water supply from habitation to households. So far, the drinking water supply was provided at a habitation level. However, under the Jal Jeevan Mission, the provision of tap water is being made for every rural home. Also, this mission focuses on service delivery and functionality. As under this mission, the focus has shifted to the assured supply of potable water to every home rather than mere creation of water supply infrastructure. Also, this mission envisages community and ownership to ensure the long-term sustainability of water supply. To ensure transparency and giving back the power to people, the water supply work is being taken up as per the demand and needs of the local community. A water supply scheme is planned and implemented following a decentralized, demand-driven and community-managed approach. Also, this mission provides for a central role for women and weaker sections in managing the water supply. As minimum of 50% members of village water and sanitation committees are to be women, and these committees will also include a proportionate representation of weaker sections of society. Further, this scheme focuses specially on children, as the mission offers piped water supply in schools, Anganwadi centers, and ashram shalas. Also, the mission offers potable drinking water in quality affected habitations, as infants and children are more susceptible to waterborne diseases. Hence, under the Jal Jeevan Mission, the provision for water supply in schools and Anganwadi centers has been made a priority. Further, this scheme offers surveillance of water quality by community. An enlightened citizenry is necessary for assured service delivery, and keeping this in view, at least 5 persons in every villages, preferably women, are to be trained in using field test kits for testing the water quality at village level itself. Also, this scheme offers convergence for long-term drinking water security, as every village will prepare a village action plan which will focus on drinking water sources, water supply systems, grey water reuse, and operation and maintenance of this system for long-term and regular water supply in every home of every rural village in India. Further, this mission makes water an everyone's business, as Jal Jeevan Mission is implemented in a participatory manner and includes the use of self-help group, NGOs and community-based organization. Thereby, it plays a major role in raising awareness, community mobilization and hand-holding. Further, in the end, this scheme also undertakes certain technological interventions for transparency and accountability, such that it provides a dedicated mobile app which will be developed for use of all stakeholders. Also, this mission includes provision for geotagging of every assets that are created, as well as linkages of tap water connection with Aadhaar card in the name of head of household. Now, after that we have discussed the reforms that were taken, let us discuss the performance of this scheme. Now, despite several disruptions in recent years, primarily due to pandemic and Russia-Ukraine war, states and union territories have made persistent efforts to implement the Jal Jeevan Mission. Now, more than 60% rural household of this country is provided with tap water connection in their homes. Also, 5 states and 3 union territories have reported 100% coverage. Hence, the country is steadily progressing towards covering all the rural households which will have a safe drinking water connection through taps. Further, more than 1.55 lakh villages, that means 25% of total number of villages in India, have reported Har Ghar Jal. That is, every household in these villages has access to clean drinking water through taps at their household premises. And in only about 3 years, more than 8.4 crore households having more than 40 crore people have benefited from this mission. However, despite good performance, this scheme faces several challenges. The first challenge pertains to lack of convergence with other related scheme of water management, such as Atal Bhujal Yojana and National Aquifer Mapping and Management Program. Further, there is an inadequate focus on water quality because as per an assessment of Department of Water and Sanitation, it has found that as many as 57,000 households in rural areas of 18 states have access to contaminated water. Further, there is lack of in-village infrastructure and lack of capacity of local communities, which has led to poor operation and maintenance of village created infrastructure. Further, due to COVID-19 pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine war, it has caused the mission to slow down considerably because it impedes access to pipes and civil construction material which are necessary for this mission. Hence, to conclude, we can say that the Jal Jeevan Mission is impacting the society in multiple ways. Regular tap water supply relieves the women and young girls from drudgery of carrying heavy loads of water to meet their daily household needs. While on the other side, the women can utilize the time which is saved from collecting water for income generating activities or for learning new skills or for supporting their children's education. This is all for today's discussion on Jal Jeevan Mission.
Dear students, there is an important announcement for you. Tomorrow there will be no DNS because as you know that the mains examination is underway and we at RAU'S IAS and the entire team has been engaged in understanding the nature of the questions which we'll be sharing with you shortly in a detailed analysis about the GS papers including the essay papers. And since the team has been engaged in this very important exercise, hence there will be no DNS tomorrow. But rest assured, no important news will be missed which will be covered in days ahead.